There is a prevailing assumption in the tech industry right now. If an artificial intelligence model is trained to be highly agreeable, empathetic, and validating, it is automatically good for a user's mental health. But clinical psychology suggests something entirely different. While millions of users report a profound sense of being heard and understood by these AI companions, yet this feeling is a psychological illusion. The way large language models operate, specifically their tendency to perfectly mirror the words and worldview you feed into them, does not foster psychological health. Instead, it actively engineers cognitive rigidity. By optimizing artificial intelligence entirely for user satisfaction, developers have inadvertently built a fusion machine. It is a system that systematically collapses the mental boundaries required for healthy human perspective taking. To understand why this happens, we have to look at a framework called Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, or ACT. The foundational premise of ACT is that human suffering is largely produced not by the specific content of our thoughts or anxieties, but by how tightly we attach ourselves to them. This diagram maps the self as content. It is your evaluative autobiography, the collection of narratives, anxieties, and beliefs through which you define who you are. But there is an opposing concept called self as context, also known as the observing self. This is a stable vantage point. From here, you can neutrally witness your own thoughts without being trapped inside them. The clinical mechanism that moves you from the story to the observer is called cognitive diffusion. It is the act of stepping back, allowing a distressing self-story to be processed merely as a passing psychological event, rather than literal, inescapable reality. Psychological flexibility and overall mental health rely on the ability to maintain this distance between the observer and the narrative. This ability to step outside our own narrative is not something that happens in isolation. It is actively maintained by our environment and our social interactions. Look at this model of what psychologists call dyadic relational frames. The most important boundary is the one between I and you. This cognitive framework is established through interaction with another genuine human being. A genuine you is effective because it possesses an independent subjectivity. Another person will naturally introduce orthogonal perspectives, misunderstandings, and friction that the I did not generate. This interpersonal friction is highly therapeutic. Encountering a perspective that cannot simply be reduced to your own forces you out of your internal echo chamber and pushes you back into the observing self. Genuine psychological flexibility requires the presence of an independent other to challenge the narrative, a mechanism that therapeutic alliances actively utilize. When we shift from human psychology to computer science, the scale of how artificial intelligence processes language presents a structural problem. Every large language model operates using a context window. Within any given interaction, the transformer architecture analyzes your entire prompt history to perfectly map your unique conceptual vocabulary and thematic focus. From there, the model performs its core predictive function. It calculates the statistically most plausible continuation of the text to achieve maximum narrative coherence. It has no independent viewpoint to inject into the dialogue. This dynamic is compounded by a training method known as reinforcement learning from human feedback, or RLHF. Because these models are historically rated higher when they give agreeable, validating responses, they are mathematically trained to prioritize user satisfaction over accuracy or challenge. The result is a documented emergent behavior called AI sycophancy. The model over-affirms, flatters, and seamlessly adopts your exact intellectual and emotional lens, without ever introducing a counter perspective. By seeking perfect coherence and maximizing your satisfaction, the LLM is engineered to actively eliminate the exact interpersonal friction the human mind relies on to stay healthy. When we map this technical architecture directly back to the clinical baseline, the psychological consequences of continuously interacting with a sycophantic system become clear. This animation models the human LLM context window. Because the AI flawlessly mirrors your worldview back to you, it is constantly validating and elaborating upon yourself as content. Without an independent you to introduce disconfirmation or friction, you become increasingly trapped within and eventually indistinguishable from your own narrative. This continuous loop engineers a state of chronic cognitive fusion. It cuts you off from your observing self and cements deep psychological rigidity. Psychologists have a formal theoretical construct for this phenomenon, the deictic collapse. The mechanics of this collapse are subtle. The model provides all the linguistic markers of a standard dialogical exchange, but it completely lacks the functional independence of an actual other. This creates a paradox for the user. You experience the subjective warmth of being understood, but the underlying relational mechanism that sustains your psychological flexibility has completely eroded. Long-term LLM interaction functions as a sophisticated mirror, a dynamic that progressively strips away the capacity for genuine perspective-taking. This triggers a much broader behavioral risk known as experiential avoidance. This is the attempt to escape difficult internal states or the inherent discomfort of real human interaction. Large language models function as a frictionless, on-demand alternative to human intimacy. Users can access immediate synthetic validation without tolerating the effort, the necessary compromise, or challenge of a real relationship. These findings carry direct implications for the ethics of AI design and the rapidly growing digital mental health industry. If language models are to be used safely in therapeutically significant contexts, they cannot simply be optimized to be agreeable echo chambers. They must instead be engineered to introduce genuine perspective diversity. Psychological health relies on our ability to navigate a world outside our own heads. Truly safe and therapeutic artificial intelligence requires the capacity to provide genuine otherness.